We're rolling one last time as Letitia Bacon sits next to our couple.
Can you take a picture of us? It's our anniversary.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Y'all love on each other.
Thank you.
And do a whole lot of praying together.
Amen.
Our wife steps away, and when Gabriel's boyfriend shows up, she can't peel her eyes away.
I can't have you here right now. My wife is here.
You told me you were going to tell her last week.
Hey, look, I can't do
Dude,
this
are
right
you
now.
serious about this? I love you, Gabriel. This is ridiculous. Come on.
I love you too. I do. You gotta go right now. Okay.
But you better tell her.
I promise.
When he leaves, her look to Gabriel says it all.
You need to tell her.
It's a little complicated.
You need to tell her. And if you love him,
It's gonna devastate her.
not telling her will devastate her more. I promise you that. Right now, you're destroying lives to protect yourself.
Hi. How
Good
you
crowd,
doing?
right?
Yeah. Loud crowd. It's great. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Good.
Let's talk about your show.
Well, you know, we can put those hidden cameras anywhere. So
Oh,
I
wait,
hope you're in your best behavior.
are we being punked right now? Are we being taped?
You never
for
know.
What would you do?
It's the show that's made it impossible for me to go have dinner anywhere because people assuming like what's going to happen. They worry, you know, like John Quiñones is here. What are you doing? I'm trying to.
Do they come up to you immediately and they're like, "Are you taping?"
Yeah.
Is this a
yeah.
setup?
And the good news is that they're all in their best behavior, so that's good, right?
Well, my favorite episode of your show was the crying baby, because as a parent, I have been there, and I wanted to ask you, how do you come up with your setups?
You know, we have a whole team, and we brainstorm. Everybody throws ideas on the wall, and we see what might work and what might stick up there and what doesn't. We watch what's in the news, and people send us ideas. People email and Twitter will send me ideas for what they think we should be doing. We've even had a contest on the air where the top winners of ideas that we use get flown to New York, and they go with us as we enact their scenario. So we get them from everywhere.
What outcome surprised you the most?
You know, every day you're stunned and surprised, not only by the fact that people are willing to speak up, because you know what? We live in a time right now, and I hope it's just a moment, where there's extreme fear and anxiety and cynicism and pessimism, and some of the, you know, these candidates for political people are making it even worse. And some folks think, as the New York Times columnist David Brooks today said, some folks think that when you respond with civility, that it's a weakness, that then you're giving in and surrendering to the evil forces out there. What you see on What Would You Do is that that's not the case, that there's a lot of good. Despite all the bad things that may exist in this country, there's still tremendous good. We've made a lot of progress, and it just warms your heart. So what surprises me is not only the way people respond, but who responds. You know, we'll be doing a scenario about racism, and into the scene walks this big dude with a shaved head and tattoos on a motorcycle, and we think, oh my God, it's a white supremacist. He's going to be really racist. He turns out to be a teddy bear. And the little old lady, you know, who with the flower in her hair and the pink dress,
is going to be so sweet and genteel.
She's like the meanest witch you could imagine. So you just never know. You never know who's going to respond.
It's so surprising. I was, you know, the New York Times did a story a couple of weeks ago about someone who fell into the tracks on the subway station, and how two guys jumped in immediately to rescue the person, while a third filmed the whole thing on her cell phone.
Yep.
So she could post it to YouTube. I was like, wow, I'm glad that, you know, she felt compelled to help.
Yeah, no, it's heartbreaking sometimes. And yes, many folks just don't want to get involved because there's a measure of risk sometimes with getting involved. How many times have you heard that there's a domestic dispute and the cops show up, and then the woman who was being abused turns on the cops and says, you know, leave my boyfriend alone. So there is that concern, but that's what makes the heroes and their heroics all the more impressive, you know, because in every one of our scenarios, at the end, someone does some beautiful thing, And often it's from the person we least expect would.
Well, and I have to say, I mean, how many times have, I'm sure both of us been on the subway, you see a parent screaming at their child and just treating the kid horribly, and I've never said anything.
That's
I
the
was like,
one
"Ah,"
time
you know.
that I witnessed something that I felt I had to get involved. More recently, I was on the islands on vacation, and I was at a CVS, and in the parking lot, this big man was beating up the child in the back seat, well, spanking her really hard. And the child's only 2 years old. And I was torn, you know, screaming, and he was out of control, the father. And he was clearly the father, so I went back there and I just gently approached him and I said, can I just talk to you for a second? He had no idea that I do a show about all this. And calmed him down, and it was just those few seconds that allowed him to realize how out of control he was, and he settled down.
So this is definitely, doing the show has made you more aware.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You know, and it happens to me because of where I come from. I'm Mexican-American, grew up in the barrios of San Antonio in poverty. We were migrant farm workers. So people looked down upon us when we were picking tomatoes in Toledo, Ohio, and cherries in Traverse City, Michigan. The other day, I was at the Dallas airport getting on board a plane, and I was in the first class line, and it said, you know, first class, and then it was, you know, general boarding, and I was in the wrong line. Everyone in first class had already gone to the general board. They were in the wrong line. I was in the right one, but they, you know, a woman at the front of the line got angry that she thought I was cutting in front of her, and she said, we're over here, you know, everyone here is waiting to get on board. So I went over and got behind and apologized to everyone along the way. And then she says to me, the announcement was made in English. We speak English here.
Wow.
And everyone around us, those who watched What Would You Do, were stunned. They thought it was a scenario. But she was serious. She had no idea who I was. She didn't care. And then when we boarded the plane, I went up to her. I kept my calm, and then I finally went up to her on my way to my seat, and I said, I was afraid that I was going to have to sit next to her for the ride to New York. But when I realized I wasn't, I leaned over and I said, you know, I do a show called What Would You Do? This hidden camera show about tackles all kinds of discrimination and biases, and you would be great for the show. Here's my card.
What did she say?
She just mumbled something under her breath, but it was angry.
Oh, I bet it was under her breath.
It's a true story. It just happened a month ago.
Do you ever have people that just don't take it well? I mean, really don't take it well?
We try to avoid that. I try to break the scene and come out just when it's getting to that point. But sometimes you can't. And we avoid trouble by having an off-duty police officer in plain clothes right in the middle of the action. And he will stand up if things get out of control and I can't get out there fast enough. And mind you, I'm just 10 seconds away. But if I can't get there fast enough, he will say, hey, it's a show, and we'll stop the action. But yeah, many times people are so upset because they thought what they witnessed was real. And sometimes they're in tears. And then I come out and I tell them it's a show, and it makes them feel like they were had. And sometimes they need a moment to just absorb what happened. And they don't want to be a part of the show. They'll often tell me, get out of here, I don't want to be on your show. And then when it settles down and we explain to them the greater good that comes from shining a light on these issues, most of them, 90% of them said, you know what, you're right, I'll be glad to sign your release. But it's disturbing in the moment.
Are there any topics that you consider too incendiary for the show?
We can't film in airports, or we hesitate because, yeah, who knows? We've thought about several scenarios that we might do at an airport, but first, it can get dangerous, and secondly, we might delay people from catching their flights, and that would be a disaster for travelers. So we don't do that one. We want to do children scenarios, but for them to be on hidden camera, you have to be 18 years old, and their parents would have to sign a release. And you know, we don't want to tell the parents because then they might tell the kids to behave in a certain way and skew, you know, the reactions. So that one, we're still working with. How can we get a classroom of kids? You know, Jimmy Kimmel does it all the time on his show. Why can't we? So we're working on that. And the other one is guns. You know, to do a scenario on gun ownership, a guy buying an assault rifle at a gun shop, and obviously our lawyers at ABC have worries about that.
What goes into setting something up? Like if you were going to do, okay, let's take the segment that you did with the mom fat shaming her daughter when they were buying donuts.
Yeah.
What goes into setting that up?
Well, the night before, well, first of all, we have our team of producers go out there and scout locations. We film a lot in New Jersey because it's close, but we love to take the show on the road. And one of the scenarios we did at the donut shop was in Portland, Oregon. We've been to Texas, Las Vegas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Atlanta, Birmingham, Alabama. And we're going to take the show on the road again because geography matters. You know, a lot of scenarios that we might do here that elicit a certain reaction will get a different reaction totally. Certainly when it comes to race and gay issues in the heartland, in small towns, in Utah, where no one has seen a black person around. You know, the closest African American is 100 miles away, or Latinos or gays. They have different reactions. We love to take the show.
As opposed to like my street in Brooklyn.
Yeah. So we love to take the show on the road because it gets different reactions. But so the producer goes out, scouts the area, finds a location that will allow us to film inside their store. We need to get their permission. And then we have an outfit called TV Boy. They're a hidden camera group that then sets up the hidden cameras and hides them the night before we even get there. So they spend all night making sure that we hide our cameras so that no one can see them. And then the next morning, our crews get there, and I get there around 9 or 10, or unless it's an early start. Sometimes we want to do a breakfast crowd at a diner, so we'll be there at 7 or 8. But most of the time, 10 o'clock, and we film all day. And we just roll the dice, and we see who reacts in whatever way. And we try to give you a very representative showing of what happened that day. Now, mind you, What Would You Do is not a scientific study. You know, the experts in behavior, human behavior, will tell you need a much larger pool to elicit, conclusions. So I like to say that What Would You Do? It doesn't give you the whole pie when the picture of racism in America or gay bashing or spousal abuse. It doesn't give you the entire pie, but it gives you a slice of the pie, and you get an idea of how Americans are thinking, certainly in that town, in that restaurant, on that given day.
Now, has there ever been a situation where you've had universal reactions no matter where you filmed?
Anything involving children is, you're bound to get moms who will, like tigresses, jump in and defend the child. Yesterday, we were filming in New Jersey a scenario about kids smoking. So we had 12-year-old kids, because on YouTube, you'll see kids are smoking as young as 10, 11, 12. We did a scenario where we had them asking people for a match. They weren't asking people to buy them cigarettes, but rather they had the cigarettes already. And it's not illegal to smoke them, by the way. It's illegal to buy them. So they were asking people going into the store, can you get us some matches, please? We just need to light up. And every single person who walked in, even teenagers, stopped the kids and grabbed their cigarettes and threw them in the trash and said, that's bad, don't.
Oh, so humanity isn't going down the toilet.
Oh, no.
Like there is some,
Absolutely. It was universal, the reaction there. And sometimes when we'll do a scenario involving something serious like abortion, in New Jersey and New York, people will say to the young girl who's debating whether or not to do it, they'll say, maybe you should, because you're 16 years old, maybe you should have that abortion, and it's going to change your life. And then move on with your life. In Texas, when we did that, in the Bible Belt, when we did that same scenario about a teenager debating whether or not she should get an abortion, every person who walked up to her said, have the baby. Put it up for adoption, if you will, but don't.
So interesting. How did you come up with the concept for the show?
We were watching, we were actually reading an article in the New York Times in a column called The Ethicist. Have you read that? Yeah, Sunday in the magazine. 11 years ago, and there was a scenario that the writer wrote about what do you do if you're at a park and you see a nanny who's ignoring the child that she's supposed to be taking care of? How do you tell the kid's parents that the babysitter's doing a lousy job? So we said, wow, we can do that, and we can have an actor be that lousy nanny with a child who's also an actor, and let's see how people react. And that was the first one we did, and it rated very well. It was part of 2020. At the tail end of 2020, there was this nice little scenario called What Would You Do? And And ABC said, can you do a couple more? And we said, yeah, I think so. And can you do 3 hours? And we said, yeah. And then they said, can you do 6 hours? And now we're doing 13 hours this season. And we thought a decade ago that we would run out of ideas, because how many can you do, right? And here we are. We've done 500 scenarios.
Amazing.
And we're still going strong.
And by the way, I have to tell you, I made the fatal mistake one time of telling a parent that I had seen their nanny and she was ignoring the kid, and the parents were pissed at me.
There you go.
You know, because they were just like, you saw one moment, we trust her, how dare you question our judgment? And I was like, I thought you would want to know.
That's why you need the hidden cameras.
See?
To show them. And that's what we do.
And let's turn it over to the audience.
Oh, great.
Hey, John, thank you so much for being here. What Would You Do is actually one of my favorite shows,
Oh,
and my
thank you.
family, it's one of the few that gets the whole family together and inspires
I
interesting
love to hear that.
discussions.
You know, families watch it together on the couch and they discuss these issues, because we bring up issues that maybe the parents don't want to bring up, but then they're faced with having to talk about it. That's good.
It's one of the very few times that gets everybody together to have these discussions that
Oh,
need
man,
to
thank
be
you.
said.
That's good.
So my question is, I'm very curious about the casting process for your show. I have a couple of friends who've made cameos as performers, and James Manzello, Ashley Carpenter, how you doing? So do you have any say as to who gets to do the segments
No.
that you put on? Or
No, I don't get involved in the casting process. The producers of every segment, they know what kind of actors they need, whether it's a teenager or whether it's a mom or a dad or a construction worker or someone who's playing the part of a Mexican day laborer, for example. So they do the castings every week, and you know, New York has such a great supply of actors that there's never a shortage. Someone might come up to me and say, look, I really want to be on your show, and I will refer them to Mark Parker, the man who does all these, in charge of the castings, and then let them make the decision. No, of course, yeah.
Next question, please.
Hi, how are you?
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
What would you say is your greatest achievement in your career thus far?
I mean, I've been a reporter at ABC for more than 30 years, so that to me was the best. You know, I worked with Peter Jennings and with Barbara Walters and Diane Sawyer and the great people of ABC News, and I covered Central America because I speak Spanish. When I was 26 years old, I was hired by the network to go be based in Miami and cover the turmoil in Central America, Nicaragua, Salvador, Panama. And my favorite stories were the ones that I did on children. And we did one story in particular about kids who live in the sewer systems of Bogota, Colombia, 300 kids who had nowhere else to go. They were runaways and castaway kids nobody wanted. And the police and the military, to flush them out, would open the manhole covers on the streets of the capital, and they would pour gasoline and then light them on fire to try to flush them out. It was horrible. Shining a light on those kinds of stories, I think, is my greatest sense of accomplishing something. Because when that story aired, for example, in that particular case, American viewers like yourselves watched it, and then they sent $1 million in donations to this man who was trying to rescue the kids, and he built an orphanage for them, and now they're all out of the sewers. So those are the kinds of stories that make me feel like I've contributed something.
Next question, please.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for coming. So, is there ever a story that like isn't working, like when you're starting to filming and like the reactions are not coming out as you would hope, or you know, maybe you have to change the way you're doing it?
I got to tell you, sometimes it's like watching paint dry. I mean, we're so bored because either maybe we thought there were going to be a lot of customers in the store and then there are none, or no one seems to care, or the actors aren't loud enough. We did one last week that aired where we wanted to get this lady shopping with her child at a store to get the attention of other shoppers, and the other shoppers just were too preoccupied with their shopping. So yeah, there are times when we just have to sit there and wait, and it just makes for a long day, and we'll be there 12 hours instead of, you know, the normal 5 or 6 hours that it takes. But it always works. There are very few pieces that have not gone on the air, really. Just I can count them in one hand.
And last question, please.
How's it going, John?
Hey, how's it going?
Good. What's been your favorite scene to do?
You know, the one that I loved doing was the one we did in Harlem about an interracial couple. We went there because we had done a story about, a scenario for what would you do. What do you do if you see a couple come into a hair salon and he's black, she's white, right? and the hair salon person starts criticizing them. When we did it in a white community, I got all these tweets and emails saying, John, why do you make white people look like racists? We're not. You know, if you do this in an African community, American community like Harlem, we'll bet there are just as many races there, and that may well be the case. So we went there, we said, okay, let's try it in Harlem. And we went to a barbershop called Denny Mo's Barbershop in Harlem, where we had everyone in the store, everyone in the salon was African American. And we had this black guy walk in with his blonde girlfriend, and the black hairdresser started complaining, why are you with her? Aren't there enough strong black women in the world? What are you doing with this white woman? And every single person in there stepped up. And in a beautiful way, defended the white girl. I mean, contrary to what we expected, everyone who spoke up on behalf of them. And their message was, look, after all the racism that we have faced as black folks in this country, who are you now to turn it on someone else? We're all in tears.
Aww. And when can we watch this? When can we watch this?
Tonight.
Tonight on
9
ABC.
o'clock on ABC. And it'll be on for the rest of the summer.
Thank you so much, John.